welcome to PNP Kids. We're so happy you're here with us today. And we're going to have a wonderful reading today of the life of St. Brigid of Kildare. And many of you have probably heard of St. Brigid. She is wonderful and famous in Ireland and famous across the world. You probably have a friend or someone you know named after St. Brigid. I do, because my sister-in-law is named after St. Brigid. That's Father Josiah's sister. And she also fell in love with the life of St. Brigid and took her as her patron saint. So let's get settled. I know how wiggly you all are, and sometimes it's hard to get out the wiggles to listen to a story. So let's get our wiggles with a little song that I know, a little poem that I know and my kids love. Okay, we learned it when we lived in England, actually, when Father was finishing his PhD. And it's a song about two little birds. So get up your two little birds like this. Okay. So this one is named Peter and this bird's named Paul. Okay? So you ready? Two little birds sitting on a wall. One named Peter, one named Paul. Fly away, Peter. Fly away, Paul. Come back, Peter. Come back, Paul. Okay, want to do it one more time? Now you know it. Okay, two little birds sitting on a wall. One named Peter, one named Paul. Fly away, Peter. Fly away, Paul. Come back, Peter. Come back, Paul. Okay, now let's fold our hands and put them in our lap. And we're going to listen to the beautiful life of St. Brigid, the Abbess of Kildare. And this is written by a wonderful woman that I know. Her name is Jane Meyer. And she lives in Santa Barbara, and she has written a lot of children's books. So I'm sure if you looked up her name, you would find many beautiful children's books she's written. But this one happens to be The Life of St. Brigid, Abbess of Kildare. In ancient days, a little girl was born. Her father was an Irish chieftain, but her mother was a slave, a Christian slave, who worked in the chieftain's house. When the chieftain found out a child was to be born, he heard that the prophecies about this child were profound and that one day she could have a mighty influence over all of Ireland. So he sold the mother. But when the child is grown, the chieftain said, "Return her to my house." Brigid was a fair and lively child, born to the humble house where her mother cooked and cleaned and tended many beasts. Brigid learned these ways as she grew and learned the ways of a Christian too, praying and singing and speaking of love and gladdening those all around her. As a young girl, her devotion to the triune God grew strong. Nothing in Brigid's life was too small for Christ's attention. She even sang to her pantry. A pantry is where you keep food, right? Where your mom or your dad keeps food in a cupboard, like your canned goods and things. So she would sing to her pantry. She would sing, "Oh God, bless my pantry, pantry which the Lord hath blessed. Mary's son, my friend, come and bless my pantry." And God blessed her pantry so much that milk and butter overflowed the jugs and vats that tried to hold them in. But once she was grown, the time came for Brigid to return to her house of her father, Lord of the lands of Faughart. A beautiful countryside it was, and it had rolling hills with streams that glittered down the slopes and sheep that bawed the days away, munching on the sweetest grass. There Brigid was given charge of her father's kitchen and dairy, but it did not take long for the chieftain to realize that bringing Brigid into his house would create troubles that he had never dreamed of. Brigid saw Christ in everyone she met, and she had a particular love for those less fortunate than herself. When the poor came knocking at the kitchen doors, Brigid handed out loaves of bread, jars of butter, and jugs of milk. When With her heart and hands open wide, she even gave away the food that was meant for the chieftain himself. Finally, the chieftain had enough of Brigid's generosity with his beloved things. So he bundled her in his chariot and he rode off to sell her to a neighboring king. While Brigid watched in the chariot for him to settle his business, an unfortunate leper approached her for alms. Brigid searched the chariot for food or coin or anything, but she found nothing to give the poor beggar until her eyes alighted on her father's warrior's sword, the sign of who he was, and it was the symbol of his strength and his rule. The sword leaned up against the inside of the chariot door, glimmering in the sunlight. What do you think she's going to do with the sword? Well, she gave it to the poor man, okay? And when her father returned and found his sword gone, he grumbled and he growled and he shook his fist, and then he presented young Brigid to the king. The king was wise, and he asked the girl, "Well, I heard you take your father's wealth and you distribute it. How much more would you take my wealth, seeing that I am nothing to you, and give all that I own away?" Brigid, of course, replied that she would indeed give all the king's wealth away if she only had the chance. The king counseled the chieftain to release Brigid from slavery and to make her a free woman. He then gave Brigid's father a sword to console him for his loss, and he bade him take the girl far away. The chieftain, still smarting from Brigid's treatment of his things, came up with yet another plan to tame and teach his daughter. He freed her as the king had asked, and he found a suitor for her to marry. When Brigid refused to marry the chosen man, a gentle and handsome poet, her family was furious with her. She had long desired a life devoted purely to Christ, with no tie to husband or home. When they pressed her yet again, Brigid scarred her own fair and youthful face. Her family finally understood and yielded to her wish and her will. So she made scars on her face so she didn't look beautiful anymore. Brigid's dreams grew grand, and knowing how faithful God had always been, she didn't hesitate to embark on something new. So she took the veil and she became a nun, marrying Christ himself and the church instead of a man. And as a sign of God's hand upon her, the scar that she had made on her cheeks was healed, and the priest placed the white veil upon her head. So a little miracle took place when she was made a nun. Along with 7 other women, Sister Brigid approached the king, the same king who so wisely refused to buy her, and petitioned him for land to build a monastery. When he refused, she asked if she could only have so much land as her humble cloak could cover. So if she laid out her cloak, she wanted to know if he would give her just that amount of land. So the king agreed with this, and Brigid laid down her cloak, but he was shocked when her cloak began to spread from beside her feet across the expanse of fertile ground until it covered the rolling hills of Cura itself. So this is where Brigid became abbess of Kildare, right there where her cloak spread out. She planted the cornerstones of her church near a high and beloved oak tree. Brigid became an abbess, but she was a shepherdess too. So she took care of sheep, right? Not only did she tend her sheep on the rolling green hills, but she continued to tend God's sheep, the poor, giving freely from her stores and pantry as she had always done. And her community grew in numbers until both monks and nuns lived under the abbess's care in Kildare, and until thousands filled the place, offering joyful praise to the Holy Trinity. But one convent could not contain all of the Irish women who wanted to follow Brigid's example. So she prayed for abundance again and again, and Christ favored each request. Brigid founded countless communities of nuns until the convents reached from sea to sea across the great expanse of Ireland. To care for all these women and the people, both pagan and Christian, that she loved, Brigid traveled often. She suffered accidents and cold, worked miracles of healing, and visited kings. On one of her journeys, she comforted an old pagan chieftain as he lay dying. She found the chieftain in a desperate state, raving so that even the servants feared him. As Brigid sat by his bed, silently braiding the rushes that covered the floor, he became calm and asked, "What are you making?" "This is a cross," the abbess said, "which I make in honor of the Virgin's Son, who died for us upon a cross of wood." The sick man, who was the chieftain, remember, listened to Brigid's words of faith and how Christ gave his life to save mankind, to save both the rich and the poor, and the old and the new. And on that day, the chief decided to be baptized, and then he died. One more saint added to heaven because of the work and the faith of St. Brigid, the abbess of Kildare. St. Brigid lived a long, long life, full of deeds dedicated to Christ. She still is known today for her generous and joyous spirit, for her determination to spread the word of Christ's love. As a patron of travelers, healers, and midwives, and a protector of flocks and herds and newborn babies. She died on the 1st of February in the year 525, and through her prayers she blesses our pantry still, as we cook and clean for those we know and for those needy strangers who pass by our door. So Holy Mother Brigid, Abbess of Kildare, pray to God for us. And listen, this is her Kentuckian, okay? The Holy Virgin Brigid, full of divine wisdom, went with joy along the way of evangelical childhood, and with the grace of God, she attained in this way the summit of virtue. Wherefore she now bestows blessings upon those who come to her with faith. O Holy Virgin, intercede with Christ our God, that he may have mercy on our souls. Amen. Now you know about the life of St. Brigid, and I want to show you something. Many years ago, Father Josiah visited Ireland with our spiritual father, and he got to visit the little communities of faith that are there that carried on the remembrance of St. Brigid and St. Patrick. You know, all of the people in Ireland love St. Brigid and St. Patrick because of what they did and what the good news that they brought to their land. And Father was given this beautiful St. Brigid cross, and this is how they would do it. This is kind of like the cross that she would weave. She wove out of rushes. And a little girl named Brigid made this for Father Josiah in Ireland when he was there. And he keeps it on his altar in his office. So I wanted to bring that to show you. And maybe you could even make it. I believe they just took a long string and went around and around and around like that, the cross, until it looked beautiful like this. Okay. I hope you have a beautiful and blessed day. Thank you for being with us on PNP Kids, and we look forward to seeing you next time.